time. We should probably do a little bit of grown-up analysis as well as the slightly more, shall we say, excitable coverage that I've been engaging in so far. Luckily, Lewis Goodall is on hand. Busy day for Lewis today. He'll be with you on LBC from 6 and is probably laying down, I believe is the correct phraseology, probably laying down one of those newsagents podcasts in the course of today as well. I'm working on the principle, Lewis, that you can tell how badly it went for the Tories because Jacob Rees-Mogg is saying it went well.
We prefer slapping down, as a matter of fact, James.
Slapping down.
Slapping down the podcast later on today. Yeah, well, look, I mean, there's a few things that your listeners and all LBC listeners and everyone else should remember when they're listening to some of this analysis. There's a lot of talk around about how Labour have done badly in these by-elections because they've got fewer votes than they did in these constituencies in 2019 in a general election where they lost appallingly, and in both of these constituencies where in 2019 they lost appallingly. That's not how elections work. Elections work by getting more votes in the election that you're fighting than your opponent, not fewer votes.
Well, you don't tempt fate. There could be a bill in the House of Commons next week in the same way that they've tried with Rwanda to redefine what counting means.
Well, indeed. So, of course, turnout is always lower in by-elections. I mean, it is almost never going to be higher than it was in a general election because, naturally a lot of people don't even know that it's happening in their constituency on a particular day. There is no other way of describing these results than a brilliant couple of results for Labour and an absolutely catastrophic set of results for the Conservative Party. And if it were just these results, then of course you could say, well, this is just a couple of results. But obviously there is now something of a pattern, both in the Sunak premiership, where of course they lost Mid-Bedfordshire, Selby and Ainsty, but also where you go back to the Johnson premiership as well, where, they were losing seats, in Chesham and Amersham and in Shropshire, Shropshire, North Shropshire and other seats as well. Either to the Liberal Democrats, Tiverton, either to the Liberal Democrats, usually with swings north of, 10%, 15%, 20%, or to the Labour Party. And the thing that really strikes me about this, James, is that if you'd said to me, in 2019, the Labour Party would be winning in seats like Selby and Ainsty, they would be winning in seats like Wellingborough. It would have been, even in a by-election in those years, it would have been completely unimaginable. Why? Well, largely why? Because Brexit was so completely salient. The fact that the Labour Party can win in such heavily Brexit-Leave voting seats says something about how the politics of Brexit has unwound and says something about how little salience that issue now has, at least for the Labour Party.
So oddly, and this has happened quite a lot lately, and of course part of the problem is people like us who have to have opinions in the moment of the moment, and then the facts change, or it turns out that some of the parameters in which we framed those opinions may have been illusory. But actually, the great political reset that people claimed had happened in 2019 may prove to be very, very temporary, and the really significant generational political reset might be happening later this year.
Absolutely, it could. Look, I think it will be a question for historians to ponder about whether the Conservative Party could have achieved a permanent realignment of British politics after 2019. I actually think that was potentially, at least, within their gift. I think I think what lost it is that Johnson had neither the intellectual application nor, to be honest, the honesty to ram it home. I think they genuinely got to a potentially post-Thatcherite moment in 2019. Two things happened. Johnson was too feckless, and also the Conservative Party didn't actually want it. There was a sort of political landscape that was there for them that was genuinely post-Thatcherite, and it just required a bit of flexibility. Actually, one of the great myths of British politics is that the Conservative Party is pragmatic. It's really not very pragmatic anymore. It probably was once, but it's not now. As soon as they have the opportunity to flex back to a more traditional version of themselves, i.e. Thatcherism, which they literally did in a sort of cosplaying fashion under Liz Truss, they did so. They could have had the opportunity with the new seats that they'd won to basically be more or less what Johnson was offering, which is a slightly soggier, kind of slightly right on culture, left on the economy, and that could have probably guaranteed them some hegemony. It hasn't happened that way, and as you say, it could, later this year, could be the realigning moment. What I would worry about for Sunak at this point now is it is possible that we're at just one of those points in the electoral cycle where it doesn't actually matter what the government does, and it doesn't matter what they say. It's like, as you say, James, people like you and me, we're paid to have opinions, we're paid to think about politics day to day. Our opinions change day to day. The public are sort of glacial in their opinion. Most of the time they're only sort of vaguely paying attention. But when they change their mind, like a glacier, it really moves. When the glacier moves, it really moves. And there's not much you can do to stop it. So my worry if I were number 10 and Rishi Sunak would be, at this point now, the public have just stopped listening. They've made up their mind.
And that is, regardless of what they throw into the mix, that is, as you suggest, likely to stay the same. Lewis, thank you. I know you. Are you going to be writing about this in your new book?
What, this particular day, this conversation?
No, not today. Not necessarily. Not this conversation. Even I'm not that self-referential. I go straight to the index. I can't believe it. What were you doing on February the 16th? No, I mean that stuff about the possibility that the Tories could have somehow transformed.
I will. Well, if it proves to be right, then I'll definitely write about it.
I find that absolutely fascinating.
Inevitably, I'll just forget it.
There is one circumstance in which the Conservatives could claim to have done rather well yesterday. And that would be if they got Laura Trott to count the votes.
Well, yes. Yeah, but she's probably not got a future as a returning officer.
Lewis Goodall with you at 6 o'clock on LBC.